Howdy friends, how are you all doing? I'm August, this is Cozy Rosy Reads, and today, you know, I just thought we would take a trip down my Goodreads and do a sit-down chatty video about some books that I might not have talked about on this channel, maybe some books that you've never heard of, by going through my Goodreads and seeing the lowest average rating of the books that I've read. This was like, I feel like a pretty popular concept of a video maybe last year, and I was like, I want to do that. So now I'm doing it. Because when I looked at my lowest rating, which is a feature in Goodreads, you can go to like the books you've read and put average rating and then do reverse and see the books that you've read and like their average rating from lowest to highest. I was flabbergasted. I was so shocked. If you've been here for a while, you might know that I pick up a lot of very random under the radar books like while thrifting, a lot of books that I have never heard of, a lot of books that just have a way of not really being talked about, and a lot of like older release books. I love finding underrated gems, and because of that, some of my like favorite books are actually on this list, and that's why I wanted to do this video. Because moral is, if you're looking on Goodreads to see if you want to pick up a book and it has really bad reviews, pick it up anyway, because these books, I have kept them because I loved them and they have horrible reviews. So I just want this to be like an eye-opening experience, finding books that maybe don't have a lot of ratings, so they are just naturally a little bit lower in average ratings. And then also, you know, taste and interest and reading is super subjective, and it doesn't really matter the ratings as long as you hopefully actually enjoy the narrative or the writing style or the experience. So I wanted to go down like a little memory lane with you all and talk about some books and share their average rating and then how many ratings there are as well, so you can kind of compare. I did finagle this list a little bit, not going to lie. I did want to pick the books that I still had physically, because a lot of the books on that list were maybe audiobooks I listened to years ago, or they were books that I read years ago and I don't remember and I don't have copies of them. So I did pick and choose a little bit, but we have 10 here that I wanted to talk about. So we're gonna make our way down. This last one here has the lowest rating of any book that I've ever read though on Goodreads. So we're gonna make our way there, and I'm really excited. I hope you can get cozy. It's just gonna be chatty, talking about plot, what I enjoyed about the book, and some stats on what Goodreads information there is on these books. So I hope you all are doing really well. Thank you for being here. Let me know if you enjoy this kind of video, if you'd like me to do like my highest rated on Goodreads, in terms of average ratings, or if there are any other kind of like sit down videos you'd be interested in seeing. My brain is having a hard time kind of coming up with like what else to share, but I do think I would like to chat more about books that I read maybe even like prior to me starting my booktube channel. I hope you can get cozy. I have my iced coffee. It is iced coffee season, and my little thrifted mug here that's fantastic, and a straw that is way too big for it. We're just vibing. So I do have my notebook here. The first book is The Pisces by Melissa Broder. A lot of these books do have vlogs where I read them, so I will link all of those down below, but I read this last summer. On Goodreads, this has an average rating of 3.26 stars. And it has, and let's see here, 19,637 ratings. So if you're not familiar with Goodreads and its platform, you can mark books as being read, but you don't necessarily have to give a rating or a review. So the 19,000 ratings are just people who've said and claimed that they've read this book. Yeah, average rating 3.26, kind of like run-of-the-mill 3-star. I loved this book. I loved this book, and I think it might have been the perfect time for me to read it. It was summer. I read it on a beach by myself. This follows a very kind of like DWM, like depressed woman moving character named Lucy, and she just got out of a very long-term relationship and has kind of gone off the rails a little bit. She's very meandering. She's a very lost and aimless character. She starts getting into a lot of like reckless behaviors, and she is trying to figure herself out, and in doing so she stays and decides to pet sit for her sister in California. And while she's walking up and down the beach, she finds a merman, and then sexy things happen with said merman. I remember talking about this book and being like so uncomfortable with the saucy scenes, the smutty scenes. They were very over the top because she is having intercourse with a fish man. But what this book really is about, at least for me, what I took away from it, is so much like self-discovery, self-love, nurturing, femininity, art, what it's like to embody like this like divine feminine energy. I loved this. Like, I truly loved it. I think it's very bizarre. It is magical realism. It's surreal. It's absurdist. It's over the top, but it's so glimmering and shimmering and such a good summer beach read. And this cover is still one of my absolute favorites of all time. So if you're looking this summer for a really good book to read on the beach or something, I definitely recommend this. If you're okay with smut scenes, if you're okay with things not making sense and you don't know if what's happening to Lucy, like having some romance with a merman, if that's confusing, or because it's not straight up fantasy, it's absurdist, and it's you could definitely analyze it if you're in that mindset. But overall, I absolutely just adored this book. I loved the writing style. I loved being in Lucy's head so much. It felt so relatable at a time that I really needed to read from a character like this. And it was just amazing. So that's the Pisces. That is the 10th on my kind of skewed list on Goodreads of lowest rated, but definitely worth more. I gave this one 5 stars. I do believe I gave it 5 stars on Goodreads as well. So hopefully that bumped it up a little bit. But yeah, that's the Pisces. So whatever to bad reviews. Okay, next we have a book that I actually read this year, very recently. I will link that vlog down below as well. And that is The Body Artist by DeLillo. On Goodreads, this has an average rating of 3.26 as well, with 10,086 ratings. This was published in the 90s, let's double check, 2001. So very early millennia. This is a tiny, very short, very impactful book. I really wanted to savor my time reading this one, but I ended up just flying through it all in like one day, basically. It follows this woman named Lauren, and she is staying at this coastal cabin. Okay, Winnie just woke up from his nap.
Hi, sweets.
So I don't want to spoil a whole lot about The Body Artist, but I do talk about it way more in depth in that vlog if you are curious. Similar to the Pisces, a lot of magical realism, surreal things start happening in the house. There's a man who shows up in Lauren's cabin, and he starts speaking and imitating the body language and the way her ex-lover, who has passed away, speaks. And it's, for her, she's questioning, is this a ghost? Is this a homeless person? How can he mimic my ex-lover or ex-husband so well? And it's just this very bizarre, very elusive, ambiguous plot, but it's so stunning because it's so grounded in reality and the routines we have as humans and what we do when we're experiencing grief and loss, finding very trivial things to worry about or find comfort in, like making breakfast and going throughout our days. I found it so stunningly beautiful, especially for a small book. Like, I absolutely love small books. They just pack such a punch and there's so much to think about. And then it just kind of chronicles different, almost like vignettes of her life after this experience and what she's going through. I feel like I can't really explain it. It is a whole experience in itself, but it's a book that's not going to give you answers. It's a book that's going to make you think and make you wonder and question, what was the motive for writing this? What was the point of it? What is the moral? The writing style was so gorgeous. Gorgeous, not even in the sense of like, it's not flowery writing style at all. It's actually very plain and easy to follow, but there's something very delicate and dainty about the writing style that I absolutely enjoyed. So that, again, pretty low rating on Goodreads, not bad, still run-of-the-mill, like just over 3 stars. But I absolutely love this book and I was really blown away by it because I just love the vague, again, almost like a DWM. Just this woman experiencing grief and loss and just trying to make her way through the emotions she's experiencing, but then also experiencing this like weird ghostly apparition that she's trying so hard to understand and catalog and be able to figure out what is happening. Because as humans, we just want to know what's happening versus just letting it happen and being present and enjoying it. So that's The Body Artist. I loved it. I do believe I gave this one 5 stars as well. Okay, next we have another book that I read this year, or maybe December of last year, and that is Cabo de Gata by Eugen Ruge. This on Goodreads has an average rating of 3.25, so not much, just 0.01 down from the Pisces and the Body Artist. But this book only has 443 ratings on Goodreads, and it is translated from German by Anthea Bell. This is another tiny, short little thing. So this book follows an unnamed writer, and he's going through it. At the beginning of the book, he's definitely a lost character. Oh my gosh, don't do that. He's a lost character. He's very aimless. He's going through a lot of transitions in his life, and he decides to treat himself to a vacation in Spain, in this tiny town called Cabo de Gata, which is not a tourist destination at all, and it's actually their off season. And this book is written so plainly. It's very quiet. There's hardly any dialogue in this entire book. So it feels very odd. It feels very plotless and meandering and very desolate. Like, it just made me feel really empty inside, because it's just this main character going to this little hotel, speaking to like absolutely no one, waking up every morning before the sun rises, walking on the beach. And then near the end, he does find a cat wandering around this like tiny little off-season village, and he wants to take the cat in, but she doesn't want to come with him. And there's just a lot of like metaphors with this cat and wanting to nurture and be nurtured. But it's very insular, and it's very vague, and the writing style reminds me a lot of kind of like Ernest Hemingway. It's just very plain and stripped down and very bare, and I think that that really does do the plot justice, because it is so eerie and just lonely. Like, this is a very lonely book. It's just so much solitude, and it's very palpable, especially reading it. It feels like you're alone as well while reading it. So this was not my favorite book that I read. I was really looking forward to it, and I thought I would really enjoy it. Oh my god, this cat is trying to bite me. I'm trying so hard. He is upside down on my lap right now. So yeah, I really thought I would enjoy this way more than I did. Unfortunately, it just wasn't my favorite, but I did feel something, and I want that to still be mentioned. I still felt emotional reading this, and I think that is a powerful thing to experience while reading. It just didn't stick with me necessarily, and it didn't really wow me or feel like an absolute favorite. I ended up giving this, I think, 3 stars, run of the mill, so that is pretty in line with the average rating of 3.26. But it has only like 400 ratings, so I think it would be cool if more people read this. I think it's really cool to just find random books in random places and just give them a try. So that's Cabo de Gata. Okay, next we have a funky one. We have a funky book that I'm so happy I found and read. That is The Job of the Wasp by Colin Winnette. On Goodreads, this has a 3.21 average rating, and the number of ratings is 714. So not a whole lot of people have read this. This cover still is like so fantastic to me. It is like this weird skin texture, like bubblegummy, and it has these like welts, and it's really gross. It's very reflective of the plot. So we follow this boy as he is entering this all-boy orphanage, and things happen really quickly and very bizarrely. And this I would definitely compare to like Lord of the Flies. Ooh. I compared this book in the past to another literary reference. It's definitely Lord of the Flies, where it's like all young boys and they turn on each other very quickly, mixed with something else. Or there's another literary reference or movie or element, maybe like some paranormal stuff. This is a very unsettling book. Very unsettling. It's very creepy. You don't know whose side you're on. The main character is this unnamed boy, is a really bizarre character, but as the book goes on, there are definitely questions of his mental stability, if he perceives reality the right way, if we trust him as a narrator and as a character. But basically the boys at this orphanage believe that this new boy like murdered one of their teachers and is a ghost. So they try to like kill each other to prove, or like to like cut each other open to make sure they bleed, to make sure they're not a ghost. And it all feels, I can't remember correctly, but it feels like this book all takes place in like one day. It's just chaos and it's messy. It's definitely like a chaotic evil kind of book. It's very unsettling and very graphic and just so bizarre because you have no idea who is reliable here and who can you believe, and is all of this really happening? It's very strange, but I loved it. I loved being on this wild ride of like, what is even happening right now and who can I trust? Oh, it was just very unsettling. Like definitely goosebumps, shivers down the spine, uncomfortableness, but not in like a horror way necessarily. It was more of like the horror of human nature as well as just body horror. So if you're not into that kind of stuff, then I don't recommend it. But yeah, I really enjoyed this one. For me, this is definitely like a 4-star book. It definitely stuck out in my memory, but I don't find myself gushing about this book or thinking about it a whole lot. But when it does pop into my brain, I'm like, that was a wild ride, and I really enjoyed it, and I thought it was really unique and bizarre and like a full experience in itself. So that is the job of the Wasp. Oh my gosh. Okay, this next one, I love this one. This is Spinning Tropics by Aska Mochizuki. On Goodreads, this only has a 3.15 average rating, and it makes me so sad, but it only has 53 ratings. 53, my friends. 53, that's it. And this was published in, I believe, again, early 2000s, 2009, and it is translated from Japanese by Wayne P. Lammers. This is fantastic. I loved this book. I read it last summer. I love this. This was a 5-star for me. I find myself thinking about this book a lot. This takes place in the early 2000s in Vietnam, and it follows a Japanese character named Hiro, and she teaches Japanese and English to Vietnamese students. And she starts a friendship with this woman named Eugen, and the friendship then blossoms into something more. This book is so sweetly written though. This is like a slice of life of what it's like to live in Ho Chi Minh City. All the street vendors, the food, the noise, the motorcycles, the cafes, the heat, the humidity. This book truly feels like you're just a fly on the wall in Hiro's life. It follows the conversations she has with her coworkers. It follows her interactions day to day, what she eats at different restaurants, what it feels like to walk into a restaurant and to feel like the air conditioning on her skin, and then how beautifully this friendship with Yoon blossoms into something more. But then also, because it does take place in the early 2000s, a lot of the push and pull and fear of being in a sapphic relationship at that time, it's just stunning. It's beautiful, it's sweet, it's delicate, another perfect summertime read. I absolutely loved it. And this book is just so much about like love and like relationships and connections. It's not a romance book. It's definitely more of like a love story and a slice of life. And it's just so beautifully detailed. The writing style is absolutely stunning. The translation is fantastic. I loved this book. So it breaks my heart that only 53 people have said that they've read it. So if you are able to find a copy, I definitely recommend, if this sounds like something up your alley, where it feels like slow literary fiction, but just it's so human driven and human connection driven that it just keeps you pulled in. At least for me, that's definitely how I felt about this book. It was just so atmospheric. I could feel like the humidity and the tension, and it was just so stunning and sweet and tender. And these two characters, Hiro and Yoon, were definitely my favorites of last year. Out of all the books I read, these two characters stuck with me the most. So this was a 5-star read for me. More people should read it. Wink, wink, hint, hint. So yeah, that's Spinning Tropics. Okay, friends, so at number 5, halfway there, we have Butterfly Skin by Sergey Kuznetsov. I love this book. I love this book. I love this book. This was a 5-star. This was actually one of my favorite books that I read in 2020, and it is translated from Russian by Andrew Bromfield. Absolutely. Oh, this book is so wild and I love it. So let me give you some stats. The average rating is 3.05, but there are only 281 ratings of it. So again, not a whole lot of people have read this book. And this is a like literary fiction, very dark, very macabre, murder mystery horror, very reminiscent of like True Detective season 1, where there's a murderer who takes women's bodies and like tears them apart basically, and hangs them up in like art installations, and he is terrifying everybody in Moscow. And then we also at the same time are following a female journalist, and she is following this case and the serial killer, but at the same time she also is a part of a like BDSM chat room, and she starts chatting with somebody who ends up being the serial killer that she's writing about. And so they start a like virtual BDSM relationship. It is slow. This is not a gripping thriller necessarily. I mean, I found it gripping, but it's not edge of your seat, page turning. It is beautifully written. It takes place in winter in Russia. It's eerie, it's uncomfortable. There are a lot of scenes of like the BDSM world and culture. There are a lot of graphic depictions of what this murderer is doing to women's bodies, the serial killer. But it's so, again, human driven. It's very character driven and it's very in-depth. And the writing style itself is just so stunning, but at the same time, it's a very introspective writing style. We are bouncing between characters and their perspectives, but you're so in their world. They feel very real. And that's something that I still think about with this book, is wanting to return to it just so I can be back in their world. So it felt very grounded in reality. So I absolutely loved this book. I think I did read it in the winter time. So I definitely recommend this one if it sounds up your alley. Again, it's not like a typical thriller, murder mystery, detective kind of vibe. It's different. It's a little bit darker. It is slower. It's more literary fiction, but it's definitely worth the read if you think you can handle some of the very sensitive topics that happen in this book. Definitely a lot of trigger and content warnings, but I absolutely loved it. So that's Butterfly Skin. Okay, coming in at number 4 with a 3.03 average rating on Goodreads is The Rose Variations by Marisha Chamberlain. And this book only has 94 ratings on Goodreads. Hardly anyone has read this or heard of it. Less than 100. We are in double digits, 94 people. I really enjoyed this book. This was at a time when I had like just finished reading The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt. I was really feeling that kind of longer saga following one character, and that's what this is. So this is definitely like light academia kind of vibe. It follows our main character Rose in the 1970s, and she is the first female professor to go onto this university campus, and she's a professional cellist. So she is a professor of music at this academic old school, so a lot of like tweed jackets, 1970s vibes, and it just follows like 5 years of her life, 10 years of her life. She starts teaching, she goes in and out of these relationships with men. She lives on a like co-op farm that's run by like this art collective of lesbians, and she performs music and writes music, and it's very quiet and slow and beautiful and so in-depth and detailed about her life. Like, it's a pretty chunky book, but like I just felt so captivated by this book. And this is one, for some odd reason, has really stuck with me, like way more than The Goldfinch. Yeah, if you like light academia, 1970s, musician, following this one kind of like, again, very aimless and meandering main character who doesn't really know what she wants with her life, but she still seems very present day to day. And just like a lot of the weird things that happen in life, like weird family events, weird relationships, miscommunications with other people. It was a full experience. I feel like I lived this life alongside of Rose, and I just thought it was so wonderfully done. And I still have not looked into if Marisha Chamberlain has written anything else, but like, I absolutely love this. And when was it originally published, actually? 2009. So I definitely would love to look into more by this author. I don't remember if I gave it like 4 or 5 stars on Goodreads, but it's one of those books that I bring up a lot in comparing other books to this and saying like, if you like this book, you would like The Rose Variations. There's just a lot. So I really enjoyed this one. I still think about it a lot. I just thought it was so enjoyable, and I can't really put my finger on why for me. I just thought it was really delightful, and it was really calming to read as well. So that's number 4. Okay, book number 3. I have talked about this one quite a bit on this channel, and I say every single time, I'm not recommending this book to you. I'm not recommending it to anybody, but I freaking loved it, but I'm not recommending it because there are so many trigger warnings and content warnings, but it is satirical. And that is Mangoes, Bananas, and Coconuts by Himilce Novas on Goodreads. It says a 2.96 star rating. So we're now down to the 2 stars, but only 69 ratings in total. So this is Cuban literature written in the 90s. It is satirical. It is with the intention of it being satire. Himilce Novas is actually a very big feminist, and she wrote this book as satire. And it's pretty clear, I think, at the beginning that you know it's satire, but it's just good to know that going into it because it is super bizarre. This is like the epitome of magical realism for me, where you don't know if what's happening is real or if it's happening in some of the characters' heads. So you don't know what's grounded in reality or not, or what's delusion, what's fantasy, what's maybe mental illness. I absolutely loved it. I loved this book. It's very short, and I can't believe how short it is with how much happens. There are several different characters that we follow, and I'll read the back so that way I get it 100% right, but it's a bold love story of estranged twins who are brought together by the forces of fate and chance. A modern myth of rich rhythms, ripe images, and magical scenes, mangoes, bananas, and coconuts marks the debut of a powerful new voice in Latina literature. I definitely want to read way more by Himilce. I was blown away by the writing style. It was phenomenal. So again, summertime energy, so light, but very dark, very dark. A lot of very uncomfortable topics, a lot of incest, sexual assault and abuse, cannibalism, torture, yikes, a lot of dark things. And this book is definitely not for everyone, and that's probably why it has a low rating. But I think you should be cautious going into it and know the different content warnings that might come up, as well as knowing that it's satirical. And at least for me, it helped knowing that it was written by a feminist. That helped my reading experience a lot, I think, just like having some extra context. I loved this. I definitely gave it 5 stars on Goodreads, but my review of it was like, this book is not for everyone. Like, just needing the world to know that this book is truly not for everyone. And I know that, and I'm not recommending it to you all. It was bizarre. It feels like it says on the back, like a myth. Like this is a folklore. It feels familiar in some weird ways, but also completely new and different at the same time. And I absolutely loved it. And for this one, I definitely do understand why it has lower ratings, especially if you don't have the context of when this was written, who it was written by, what the intention was for it to be satirical. And the magical realism elements were just freaking stunning, and I absolutely loved it. Just imagine like butterflies flying all over this girl's body and hair and head all the time. Beautiful imagery. So that's mangoes, bananas, and coconuts. Okay, my friends, we're getting down to it. The second to last book of my lowest rated ever is The Fig Eater by Jody Shields, which really surprises me because I loved this book, but I do believe I read it in like 2014, 2015, a while ago, basically. This has an average rating of 2.93 with 3,053 ratings. I loved this book when I read it. This was a 5-star. I have not read it in a very long time. Who knows if I read it now if I would enjoy it, but I feel like I would because it takes place in Vienna in 1910 and it is dark. This is like such an atmospheric book. It follows like the murder of a girl, dark like occult magicians, a lot of like eerie, moody, foggy atmosphere. It's a page-turning tale of murder, sleuthing, and sexual secrets in a rich, glittering evocation of a city and a culture in fateful transition. There are so many characters in this book. It bounces a lot from my memory between these different characters, but it's just stunning. It's just literary fiction. It feels slow, but the writing style is a little bit more flowery and gorgeous and like a little luscious and over the top and very sensual. I don't even really remember the plot. I just remember like the images in my head, like while reading this, it gave me. It felt very cinematic to read this book. I had like a full experience reading it. I thought it was gorgeous, but it's been a while. It's been a while, I can't quite remember, but just the vibe of Vienna in the early 1900s is stunning. So I love this. I also read Jody Shields' other book, The Crimson Portrait, and that was also on this list of like the top, maybe it was in like the top 12, somewhere in there of like lowest rated books, but I personally really loved the writing style in both of those, as well as the plots. Historical fiction, very like languid, ambient, very just like romantic writing style, if you like that, specifically with historical fiction. I think it's great. So that is The Fig Eater by Jody Shields. And the moment we have all been waiting for, my friends. If you've been here, you might know what book this is, or maybe not. I will link the vlog down below where I read it. The lowest book, the lowest rated book I've ever read, the average rating ever, hands down ever in my life that I've ever read, is Window on the Seine by Frances Y. McHugh. This has an average rating of 2.75 stars, which still I feel like isn't that bad, but it only has 4 ratings on Goodreads, friends. 4 people in the world have claimed that they've read this on Goodreads, and I am one of them. This was a just like really random find that I found it at like an estate sale warehouse, It's like 25 cents. I was like, I really like this cover. It was written in 1969. It's historical fiction. It takes place in 1869. And it follows this woman named Anna, and she goes to Paris to accompany her brother while he's on a business trip, and she stays at this huge villa on the Seine. And weird things immediately start happening. This book makes literally no sense. It is the most bizarre thing. One of those books that like the writing style is not great at all. It's very dry and very boring. But then what happens is like she wakes up in the middle of the night and like her armoire is like moving towards her, and she looks out her window and there's like a body floating in it, like on its back, like just hovering outside of her window in this like giant villa. And she's like, oh my God, what is happening? So she goes downstairs and these people in the ballroom are just having a seance, and then it's like never talked about again. And then all of a sudden, like there's an impending war. I can't quite remember what was happening there. So she goes and flees. She's in charge of this like young boy because the nanny is secretly a spy for the war. So she takes the boy and they start traveling to the Suez Canal. Weird love triangles, and all that happens in this tiny little thing. The most bizarre, there was like no motive or anything. Like near the end of the book, it just like kind of ended. And I just laughed out loud. I was like, this is the most bizarre thing I've ever read in my life. Like, this is so odd. Why is there a seance and then it's never talked about again? Why wasn't it a big deal that there was like a body floating outside of her window? Why is she now like taking all of these trains and boats for like weeks to the Suez Canal to escape this like impending war and this evil nanny? It's so bizarre. It's definitely one of the weirdest books I've ever read, just because like it just doesn't make sense. And I read a lot of absurdist surreal books, as you can probably tell from this stack. I love that stuff. So there was so much enjoyment in this for me, but there was just like no intention or motive. I'm just like, who made this? Francis Y. McHugh, who are you? What was the purpose? I'm just so confused and lost. So I understand the rating for this one, but I gave it 3 stars on Goodreads, and I think my review is literally just me saying, ha 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 ha, WTF is this book? So very odd, but I'm keeping it forever because I thought it was just like the weirdest thing I've ever read, because it wasn't even good. The writing style was not great. It was super boring and very rudimentary. No flowery language, no flowery descriptions. It was a lot of like dialogue and like very linear storytelling. And it was just so odd. This one I definitely understand, but I gave it 3 stars. But it was still really enjoyable to read. Like I still was just like laughing at it the whole time. So I knew I had to continue reading it and just power through and enjoy it. So that is Window on the Seine, the lowest rated book that I've ever read in my life, that I'm aware of since cataloging things on Goodreads. So there we have it, friends. These are my like lowest rated books on Goodreads. Average ratings, and as you can tell, some of them are my favorites of all time. Like most of these are actually 5-star books for me. There was only like 2 in here that were only like 3 stars, and that's pretty incredible if you think about it, considering that ratings don't matter. Don't judge a book by its ratings or its reviews. I mean, unless it's like a book that is severely offensive, horrible, I mean, then yeah, reviews are fantastic. But just keep in mind while you're looking for books, don't be afraid to pick up something that you've never heard of or that maybe has really bad reviews on Goodreads. And I want this to be like a testimony to the fact that so many of these were 5 stars. Some of them had only 50, 60, 4 ratings and reviews ever since being published. And just take a chance. Take a chance on those books. You'll never know like what you're missing out on until you pick it up. So thank you so incredibly much for being here, friends. I'm so happy I have read so many wonderful, weird books in my life. I am so happy about that. And I hope you enjoyed this journey into the Goodreads fun stuff. But yeah, definitely let me know if you want to see more of this kind of style, going over like Goodreads statistics, or any type of like superlative videos you would like me to do for sit downs, like my favorite translated books, my favorite memoirs, my favorite blah blah blah. Like definitely let me know, because I'm struggling to think of like what kind of content would you all be interested in. Like my favorite classics, my favorite, I don't know, just let me know. I would love to hear your ideas and like actually hear what you would like to see. So anyway, thank you all so incredibly much for being here, friends. I appreciate you so much. I hope you enjoyed this little video. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day or night or morning, and I can't wait to see you all again very soon for my next video. Stay cozy, my friends. Bye!